Hello and welcome to today's Sports Psychology Revision Screencast. The focus is going to be on attributions. Now, attributions is a huge area, both in kind of sports psychology, in professional sport, and also in mainstream psychology. Everybody uses excuses, okay? And what we're going to have a look at is the theoretical aspect that underpins excuses, and they're termed attributions. And we have to have a look at one specific model, Weiner's attribution model, and we have to have a look at it to make sure that if we are using reasons for success or failure, that we can categorize and classify them using this specific model. Now, the reason why we do this, as you can see here, these are the things you'd be relatively familiar with. Reason we do this is because either directly or indirectly, consciously or subconsciously, we are either putting ourselves towards a condition called learned helplessness, where this condition, a psychological state where we consider failure inevitable, or we're kind of moving ourselves towards this idea of mastery orientation, a motivation to be an expert in something. And these two things are absolutely vital. These are going to form the basis for our exam questions. A combination of these two conditions and how the reasons we give for success and failure from Weiner's model of attribution will either help us promote mastery orientation or help us maybe promote what we don't want, learned helplessness. Okay, so let's have a look then. First up, attributions then. Okay, so you could put, I've put here the process of ascribing reasons for the causes of success or failure. You would get away with saying the reasons for success and failure, that's fine. So that's your first attribution there. So when we are successful, we give reasons for it. When we fail, we give reasons for it. In order to classify this in an exam, and of course in academic study of kind of PE, we need to use this kind of model here. So what you've got then is two locuses, not massively important. So you've got here stability, you've got here, and then we've got locus of causality on this section here. Now, if we have a look on here, locus of stability then, stable or unstable, and then if we go down from there, okay, stable. If any attribution falls under this bit here, stable, it means it cannot be changed or it's relatively difficult to change. And then you've got unstable here, which means it can change. Okay, so that's fine. On top of that, we have another kind of column here, or another type of attribution, which refers to internal. And these are reasons we give for success or failure that are due to us, from within us. It's something we control. And then on top of that, external is something that has from outside. The reason we give for success or failure is from an external source, from outside. Now, obviously, I'll go through that just to give you a quick overview of them. Now, basically what will happen is when you are attributing things, you usually use a combination of something from the locus or causality here, an internal or external, with a stable or an unstable, and that will fill in our four boxes here. So if we have a look then, first we'll look at then, if we attribute success, for example, as I put into here, to internal stable attributions, it would be something, the example would be ability. Okay, so if you won, for example, you would say, we were the better team. Okay, that is based around ability. Internal because it's from within, stable, it can't change. Ability is considered relatively stable, and it's something that you kind of that you're born with. Certainly physical abilities. So from there, then the next one we have a look at is internal unstable. So we've got internal coming down here, unstable here, and the key thing with this, of course, it can change, but it's from within, and we all know that effort can change. So sometimes you put lots of effort in, other times you don't, and that is the key thing here. Now, what I've put in here is an example of this. If we're looking at it from a positive or a best fit positive scenario, is we're saying we won because I gave it all I had. We gave it all we had. We tried our hardest. Now, I'll put down here, I'll put this in green. This is the only one in green. This is the only attribution. It's the golden attribution, basically, and it's the best one for both success and failure because we have control of it. It is the only attribution we have direct control of changing. So could I just ask you to make a quick point on here? Its controllability is huge for this. It can be controlled. So if we go on from that then, next one, let's have a look over to here. We have task difficulty. So external, outside. Task difficulty, okay, it's relatively stable. So, for example, if you're trampoline or gymnastics, you go for a very difficult combination move, okay, someone here might have failed it and said, I wish I'd have picked an easier tariff move, so something that relatively more simple. I wish I'd have got into an easier football, rugby, hockey, netball league, okay, because once you're in it, it's very difficult for that to change. It stays the same, okay, that league level will stay the same. Top of that, we have luck. Okay, so this, of course, is external, so external, and it can change. You'd hope that the referee isn't always going to be on their side. So, for example, here someone might be saying, we lost because they had the referee on their side. It's external, okay, and it's unstable because hopefully you would have a different referee the next game, and that might change. So, they are the attributions then. So, what you have to be able to do is have an understanding first up. There are 4 types of attribution. There are stable attributions, there are unstable attributions, there are internal attributions, and there are external attributions. And they usually combine with another area to give you a specific example. Now the examples, so if these are the types, 1, 2, 3, 4, the examples are the things in here: ability, task difficulty, effort, luck. Now if you're in an exam question and it's in a longer question and you want to put some specific quotations that kind of show whether someone's been successful or they failed, you're more than welcome to do that. The exam questions will often have in their kind of makeup, in the kind of first part of it, they will have a quotation, and you have to be able to classify using one and then the outsides to make sure you can do that. Now, if that is the kind of, that's the subject knowledge there, that is the kind of grid that you have to work off. Now, when you work off that, if you, I suppose, attribute success to certain things, if you get the right attributions, it can have a real positive effect on 3 to 4 key things, or 3 things really. It can, if you do the right types of attributions, and we'll look at those in a second, it can help you increase your motivation, your confidence, and it can also increase the future expectation of success. If you use the wrong attributions, it can actually decrease your motivation, confidence, and future expectations of success. So the way that we attribute our success and failure is absolutely vital. And the reason why it's vital is, as I mentioned on the first slide on the specification, if you attribute successfully and well, it can lead to a kind of positive condition called mastery orientation. But if you attribute unsuccessfully and kind of, I don't know, if you attribute in the wrong way, it can have a real dangerous effect on the psychological state, and it can lead to this idea that failure is inevitable and learned helplessness. So if I just put those down here, okay, so good attributions or effective attributions can lead to the green one here, where you're motivated to become an expert, whereas you know, not good or kind of unsuccessful attributions or ineffective attributions can lead to learned helplessness. For example, this will lead to you deeming failure as inevitable, which can have real dangerous effects on these 3 here. Okay, so that's the idea behind it. That's your subject knowledge. Okay, this is the grid. These are the things that can either increase or decrease, and these are the conditions as a result of these kind of effective or ineffective attributes that can happen. Let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail then. So if we go on, let's have a look at mastery orientation then. It's what we want, okay? Mastery orientation then is this idea as we're looking for kind of this approach that, you know, it would be defined like this. It's a condition that it means that you are motivated to be an expert, and it's really, really linked to high achievers. So if you can get this kind of way of attributing, it really does put you into a position to achieve highly, whether that's in sport, education, or whatever you're interested in. So if we have a look at that, if this is what it is, okay, this is what the condition of mastery orientation refers to. Now what we have to look at is using Weiner's attribution model. How do we attribute success? Okay, that's the first thing. So we'll have a look at that. So when you are successful, e.g. you win, you do well, you place in a race or something, whatever it is, whatever your sport is, when you are successful, if you want to achieve mastery orientation, it's really important that you attribute your success to internal factors. Okay, so internal factors can be a combination of internal stable, for example, ability, or it could be internal unstable, for example, effort. We won because we tried harder, we won because we were a better team. Those 2 attributions there. So they are the reasons. They need to be internal. And, you know, as I said earlier, the golden attribution for everything. All educational research now basically refers to this idea that you should praise effort. Because if you praise effort, it's something that you've got to keep trying. You're in charge of it. You control it. You've got to try hard. Okay. Sometimes if it's just ability, it can have a negative effect because people think, well, I'm just good at this. I don't need to try hard. So I think a combination of them is best. Okay, but ultimately, internal would need to be your number one thing, and a combination of those 2, using both, will just show you understand they are the 2 key attributions that will promote this kind of motivation to be an expert. Now, the reason behind it, as I said earlier, was those key 3 factors. So it's effective because this means that the performer has personal responsibility They have a kind of an eye, certainly for effort, they have control. And as a result of that, it would increase those three key terms I talked about earlier: confidence, motivation, and future expectations of success. Now, if I went from there and said this, that is kind of why it's effective. Now what we have to have a look at is, of course, just because somebody is an expert or they're motivated to become an expert doesn't mean they always win. Everybody loses, okay, and whatever it is. And when they lose, and when people who are really focused on or motivated to become an expert, aka mastery orientation, they have a certain way of attributing, or there is a more effective way of attributing. So if you fail and you're working towards this expertise, the best way to attribute is to internal and unstable factors such as effort. E.g., I lost because I need to try hard. Next time I'm going to work a little bit harder. And this is so effective when you fail, and I suppose working towards mastery orientation, because the performer has personal responsibility, and this is the key thing here, they have control. They have control for changing effort, and this has a really powerful effect on maintaining future expectations of success and motivation, because it makes you think, yeah, I didn't do so well, but if I try harder, I control it, I'm personally responsible, therefore it really gives me that intrinsic motivation and that feeling that I can be better in the future. And that is why it's so important. Now, we'll have a little look at the fact that, let's be honest, not everyone does this, okay? But what I'm saying is that this is the most effective way of attributing failure if you are motivated to become an expert as with regard to mastery orientation. So that's what you do. There's success. Sometimes people who are in this condition are successful a lot of the time, but sometimes they fail, and it's the way you respond to that failure that will dictate whether you are working towards mastery orientation. Okay, so look then. Next one. So if that's mastery orientation, let's have a look at learned helplessness. So this is the polar opposite. So if we had mastery orientation, you're really motivated to achieve expertise. We have the other side, which is learned helplessness. And I suppose it kind of comes from the word hopelessness. Okay, helplessness. You can't do anything about it. In your mind, failure is always going to be inevitable. So if we look on here, that's a definition. Failure is considered inevitable, and it's often linked to low achievers. Now, let's have a look at this. We'll start off then. If somebody where failure is considered inevitable, for example, learned helplessness, if they fail, they're so down on themselves that if they, on these odd occasions that they're successful, when they are successful, they attribute their success to external factors, particularly unstable factors such as luck. I mean, you often see it. People say, oh yeah, people who are really low on confidence, the reason I was successful, the reason I won, it's just lucky. Okay, the other person fell over, something like that. And that then, of course, this is not an effective way, and it acts as a barrier, okay, to kind of developing a mastery orientation and promotes learned helplessness, because they have no control. Okay, so people, when they are successful, they're a learned helplessness person, they think failure is inevitable, but when they're actually successful, then the reason why they're successful, according to them, is something that they have no control over. So, for example, it's not internal, doesn't give personal responsibility, therefore does not increase, or in fact will decrease, motivation, confidence, and future expectation of success. So I thought that's really important just to see, because people with learned helplessness do not always fail, they sometimes are successful, as is the case with mastery orientation. So if we go on from there then, okay, if somebody with learned helplessness fails, I'm sure you can work this out now. Somebody who has learned helplessness, when they fail, they will attribute their failure to pretty much all the time stable internal. So ability, I am useless, I just can't do this, I'm not good enough. And this, of course, is really dangerous and really does, I suppose, accentuate this feeling of uselessness or kind of helplessness and learned helplessness, because it's not effective, because they have no control over it, because they're saying that ability is a permanent thing, therefore it decreases their confidence, motivation, and future expectation of success. Now that's a pretty comprehensive kind of overview of both mastery orientation, success, mastery orientation, failure, learned helplessness, success, learned helplessness, failure. This is just trying to get you into your head that whichever condition people have, they still win and lose. They still have success and failure, and it's the way they attribute that kind of either contributes to the condition that they experience, whether that be learned helplessness or mastery orientation. Okay, so if that's that, then I think we look at it and say that's fine. So why is it then that elite sports coaches often attribute failure to anything other than internal factors? You know, why is it when you see football coaches in the media, because they're the things we see in the media the most, why is it that whenever they fail, there seems to be a kind of a load of excuses that as academics in PE, we could categorize as external. Okay, so what we're going to do now then is evaluate the reasons for the coaches use these external attributions for failure, because this is another way that you might be asked an exam question. It could be a nice easy one where you're just about mastery orientation and helplessness, or it could be something about evaluating external attributions for failure. So if that's the case, let's have a look. So I'm just going to get you to watch this. Can you watch this clip? It's a very short one. When you watch it, can I just ask you to try using Weiner's model? Can you try and categorize the attributions?
I hear it, but now I've tried to be brave enough to say the pitch was really dry.
So it makes sense to keep the ball. That wind didn't help with that.
Yeah, the injury crisis started as well, so then that obviously cost us the rhythm.
I already a few times. I know how people think about it if I say it, but the pitch got dry and dry.
The pitch, unfortunately, first time that I experienced snow in England, so that's pretty difficult.
A few players who were ill, who showed sore throat and all what you can have.
If all water we had, and then after 15 minutes it was really dry, the wind and a little bit, and then it was difficult. You could see it. A lot of passes. You thought, why are they playing this? But it was difficult.
I know people don't like when I say that, but the wind came from all directions, so you saw that in a lot of situations. It didn't help any football.
Okay, all right, so as you can see, that will be an example then, maybe, if we have a look at it. If we looked at that section then, I've just put this onto here. So I've put the model there, okay, and I wonder what you thought. So, I mean, I've put these on here. Evaluate the following attributions for failure. I mean, if you look onto here, we lost because I'll put some examples here from that clip. Wind, snow, my players had sore throats. They were some examples of attributions for failure from somebody who you would think would be working towards mastery orientation. So what we have to be able to do then is as follows. We need to be able to evaluate that attribution for failure. So if I said to you first up, the first thing we've got to do with a question that comes up like this, it gives you a scenario. And it says this: we lost it to the below is a following is an attribution for failure, or a common attribution for failure. So there you go. And if I said to you now the question asked you to evaluate it, of course the first thing we have to do is classify it. So external and stable, for example, this would be considered bad luck. So if that is our categorization from Weiner's model, and that's the example. Now from that, it now requires us to evaluate it. Now, what we have to have an understanding of, people, elite sports coaches do it for a reason. What we have to be able to do if the question says evaluate is we must be able to give strengths and weaknesses behind that evaluation type. Now, this is the hardest question you could get, but I just wanted you to experience it before the exam. So, strengths of this attribution. So the first strength is this. Now, it's effective, because we've got to look at it from two angles. The reason why it's effective is because it takes away personal responsibility, and because it's unstable and it's external, it can change. Okay, so what that does, it can maintain motivation, confidence, and future expectation of success. So they are the strengths of that attribution. So you can see that. Now, what we know about mastery orientation is it's not the most effective way of attributing it. So what we can do for our weaknesses of this attribution would be as follows. Okay, it's ineffective because the people, for the Jurgen Klopp in that case, or the football coach and the team, they have no control over changing it. They're not personally responsible for changing it. And this idea of using this strategy of constantly blaming external unstable attributions is something called a self-serving bias, e.g. you are serving yourself by giving a biased attribution to try and protect motivation, confidence, and future expectation of success. And that is the reason, as we looked at that, that's why I do it, but it's called a self-serving bias. Now, the downside, of course, another weakness is it's a short-term strategy. It stops people from addressing their weaknesses. So that's just one. I just wanted you to see that, because that to me is the hardest way you could get an attribution question. So if you've got an evaluate, your job is to make sure you give a strength and a weakness, as you would know by now. But when you're doing it, it's just making sure that sometimes the question is going to be slightly different to what you'd expect. Okay, right. Let's have a quick quiz then. So can I ask you just to have a look through these questions on here. Pause now, please, and see how you go with regard to recalling this information. Okay, so if you have a look onto here then, so there's some examples on there, so just a couple of quick ones onto here, just check you feel okay with that, so I'll just go through them quickly. Onto here then, so you can see 2 attributions for success that promote mastery orientation: internal unstable effort, internal stable ability. I haven't put too much more on this, it's just a quick recap. 1 attribution failure, commonly linked to learned helplessness: internal stable ability. What is the why is effort the best attribution for failure? Why is it the golden attribution for failure? Key thing here, really important, I just wanted to go for this, because the person controls and they have personal responsibility for changing it. It maintains motivation, confidence, and it maintains future expectation of success. That is why, because it's changeable. Okay, changing, control, those keywords are vital. And what is the term for coaches using external attribution of self-preservation of their team or themselves? Self-serving bias, to try and maintain motivation or protect motivation and confidence. But we know it's a short-term strategy, really. Okay, so that's that. Let's have a look at some exam questions then. So if we go on, there's 2 exam questions I've put on here. 1, very basic. 2, that requires a little bit of kind of analysis. Let's have a look at it. First one. Now, this is from an old specification, and this one asks you to identify 4 types of attribution proposed by Weiner's model and give a practical example of each type identified. Now, this question, first up, easy. Second thing, you start to think about it and think, right, okay, now I said there are 4 types, so what you need to be looking at this is to think, right, the things on the outside of Weiner's model, so 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, they are the attribution types, and then what you need to do, to be safe with this, I'd probably just give 1, and then give the 2 things going across from it. Give 1, give the 2 things going down from it, 2 things going down from it, 2 things going across from it. That's the best way to do it, so identify the things on the outside, and then go across and give 2 examples. So let's have a look at what your answer should have been. So I'll put it onto here then. So you look on here. So 1, external, and what I've done there is given examples of external unstable and external stable, and you put both examples there. I think you just want to be safe, don't you, in the exam? So internal, okay, so you put 1 effort, 1 ability, so you've got 1 unstable, 1 stable, stable on its own, so you have a stable, external, stable, internal example, and you have here unstable, which will be linked, I've particularly linked this to, unstable there to internal. Okay, so that's examples of what you could do for that question. Relatively simple, but just making sure that types of attributions in your head are clear. Now, let's have a look at the next question. A little bit more difficult then. So if we have a look at this, exam practice for attribution. So this is the question, and what I've done is tried to highlight bits of it, but I'm going to then go and annotate it. So a coach gave following reasons why cyclists won their race. Easy course, wind behind you, lucky that a rider who was first hit a pothole. So this is an attribution for success. Okay. Now, what you need to do, this is a scenario which you would need to annotate, and then it asks you to discuss the effectiveness of the coach's attributions in motivating the cyclist. Part 1. Part 2, describe other attributions for the success that the coach might use to motivate the cyclist. So 2 parts. Okay, what I've done now on the next slide is annotated it. If you feel like you can go for that now, pause it and have a go. And then I've annotated it, and then maybe have a go after that. So I've had a look at it. First things then. So what I've done is anything on here, so there's classification. We need to classify using Weiner's model, first task. So 1 classification here, 2nd classification here. Using Weiner's model, can we do that? Now, once you get down to here, we've got to then make a decision. Is that attribution for success effective? We've got to make a judgment, and then we've got to justify why we think it is. And remember, what we've got to do is once we've classified it, okay, so we put that in, we've got to justify whether we think it's a first mark you're going to get, obviously, is it effective, is it not effective? Once you've made that judgment, can you justify why you think that is the case, giving examples? Now, once you've done that, of course, remember, these have been classified for a reason. So you must make sure you justify classification 1, classification 2, linking it to our key factors, that the reason why we actually, what those 3 key terms that we use all the time. Now the part 2, of course, is asking you to describe other attributions for success. So what we know is there are more valuable attributions that have been given up here for success, because we want to promote mastery orientation. What is this promoting? Okay. That's what you need to do. Give the examples from there. So I'll get you to pause it now, see how you feel with regard to that question. And if we have a look at the mark scheme now, then what I've done then, so first up, first mark, not very effective, good, positive attribution. That's the first one, 1 mark. Now, what we've then had to do is classify. So external factors, okay, they've given a generic classification there. So external factors, which won't motivate or build confidence. So remember, we talked about those 2 key things. Now what it does is goes down to here and starts to give specific external attributions for success. Success, in this case, lucky, which is an unstable external attribution. So I've just made sure you've got it on there. So it's gone from generic, external, the type of attribution, to the specific, okay, which is combining it with unstable, okay. And then I've put down here, there's a lot of waffle on this, so then I've come down to here, which will reduce the cyclist motivation and confidence. Next one. The coach says the course was easy, okay, so then you categorise this a little bit more specifically. So external stable, not in their control, keyword to go along with motivation, confidence, future expectation of success. Okay, then you go down to this, and it said this would not develop mastery orientation, or it could lead to learn helplessness would be a better thing. This is a specimen mark scheme. And then down from there, what suggestions will we give? So, as we know, if you want to promote mastery orientation, success will be attributed to internal reasons, generic type of attribution. Then we go down to the specific attributions you should use. So I said it would increase their effort, it's in their control, and if you go down to here, you put it down to this section here, confidence, motivation, but then you talk about internal unstable, most effective, internal stable, another effective one. So if you go down to there, that's what you would have to do to answer that. Hopefully this has helped, because I look at this and think, right, 3 types of questions you could get. 1, basic, describe the types of attribution. 2, I think this one will be the second most difficult type of question you get, which is a scenario, which you've just got to make sure your exam techniques are. The third one is the ability to evaluate an attribution, because even when we see something and think it's not very good, there would be a strength that you could put if you got asked to evaluate, which is the hardest possible question you could get. Okay, thanks very much.